Good evening, my friends, and a big welcome to Jeremy Carl Live for Wednesday night. So there's a surprise. Immigration is still the big topic of the day. Now, the PM and the Home Secretary Suella Braverman today continue to talk up the illegal migration bill, claiming it will really stop the boats. Now, this is the third damn day I've started this show with this, and I just wondered if you, like me, are a little bit fed up of hearing slogans about being tough on immigration without actually seeing any action to back it up. Today at PMQS, Labour leader Keir Starmer, or Captain Hindsight, as I like to call him, tried to challenge the frankly dismal Tory record on controlling our borders, but Dishy Rishi, who cleared out about 4 Weetabix this morning, wasn't having any of it. Have a listen to this.
The Prime Minister says they will detain people who aren't eligible to claim asylum here and then return them. Well, they already tried that under the last legislation. Last year, 18,000 people were deemed ineligible to apply for asylum. That's the easy bit, the talk. But as for the action, Prime Minister, how many of them have actually been returned?
He asked about arrests, he asked about our laws. Actually, when I was in Dover yesterday talking to our law enforcement officials, what did they tell me? Precisely because of the law that the Conservative government passed last year, they have now been able to arrest more than double the number of people they did before. 397 in the last 6 months. But stopping the boats, Mr. Speaker, stopping the boats is not just my priority, it is the people's priority. But his position on this is clear. He wanted to, in his words, scrap the Rwanda deal. He voted against measures to deport foreign criminals, Mr. Speaker, and he even argued against deportation flights. Well, and we know why, because on this matter, he talked about his legal background. He's just another lefty lawyer standing in our way.
Goodness me, feisty Rishi now joining me to discuss this tonight are TalkTV's political editor Kate McCann and an all-star panel, leader of the True and Fair Party Gina Miller, writer and broadcaster Candice Holdworth making her debut, and broadcaster and commentator Denise Headley. Welcome one and all. Kate, let's start with you. I've never seen Sunak suffice. He sort of carried it all off today, didn't he?
Yeah, but I mean, I think he has to,
Yep.
because this is such an important issue for his party, and you could really hear them today. I mean, sometimes in the Commons, and I'm there every Wednesday to listen, it can be quite quiet, and you know when they're trying to create this sound of a roar on the backbenches, they don't really believe in it.
Yep.
But today, it really was there. The Conservative backbenchers absolutely howling after their leader. I mean, they really were pretty pleased with his performance. I have to say, though, for the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, he chose to do what he does best, which is hone in on the detail. And the detail doesn't look good for the Tories, which is why they've had to come up with a new piece of legislation pretty much just a year after the last one, because it didn't work. And Rishi Sunak's really uncomfortable having to add that.
The really interesting thing for me is, and I think that the reason that it changed a little bit today is maybe the British public and the Tory backbenchers are seeing a bit of action finally. But it asks questions, doesn't it, now of the Labour Party, instead of just from the cheap seats criticising. The British public will want to know what they would do differently. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and it's actually really interesting that Sir Keir Starmer chose to focus on immigration entirely today, because it's a really uncomfortable issue for the Labour Party, because they don't want to have to come down on the same side as the Conservatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
They really want to try and have a more nuanced approach to this issue. But as you saw from those clips there is no nuance in the House of Commons when it comes to immigration policy. You are either with us or you are against us. And so that's a really difficult place for Keir Starmer to be. His own party actually started to leave the Commons today fairly early. There were pretty big gaps on the benches because lots of them are very uncomfortable with what the government is trying to do, but they also recognise that voters want to see some action here. They want to see the numbers coming down.
I think that's the really interesting point. And I know you had and have done an exclusive interview with Suella Braverman. And I know that this interview is going to be played across Talk in the next few hours and days. The big question for them, of course, is why has it taken them so long to actually do something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the question. And today, the government essentially is having to sell a policy which it has come up with before. And they are the party of immigration control. So I asked Suella Braverman in that interview, you know, have governments previously, including ones that she's been part of, been too timid?
Have a look at this.
I think this Conservative government has been voted in partially because we're not afraid to say what's necessary and do what's necessary to fix the problem of the boats, but also more broadly illegal migration. And I think that is where the vast majority of British people are. I speak to people on a regular basis who voice their frustration when they look at the scenes of thousands of people coming across on a boat across the channel. I mean, the humanitarian element of this cannot be ignored. People are dying. People are dying, and we cannot allow this to continue, and that's why we do have to take very robust measures. I believe that's the fair thing to do. I believe it's the humanitarian thing to do.
To bring you all in, Gina, if I could start with you. My question, and I think Kate touched it there with Suella, is 13 years this government has been in power, and whether people like it or not, immigration is so central to so many people's minds right now, I think perpetuated by the cost of living crisis, I have to say. Suddenly the rhetoric's quite strong. Is it window dressing for the next election, or are we finally seeing a Tory government doing what they've always said they're going to do?
Well, I think the howling in the chamber, the whole display in the chamber was disgraceful, but the howling is a party howling in desperation because they've got nothing else to say or do. I mean, they've cut the immigration border forces to the bone. This Tory government have not invested in the border forces. They've not invested in legal routes. And because they've got the policy so wrong for 13 years, this is a mess they've created. And the problem is they don't know how to solve it. So they keep coming up with these playing to the public solutions and policies, which have no depth, no details, and will not work. It's a complete lie that this legislation is going to solve the problem. There is
so what is?
in it.
Candy Solvers, welcome to Jeremy Kyle Live. What is going to work? Because Gina makes a point that so many people make to me, which is, that the election in effect started and it's just sound bites and, it's all, there's nothing of substance or anything that can work. What will work?
Well, the people who implemented a similar policy in Australia say it will work because they did the same thing, that if you come here via these routes, your right to settle in the UK is automatically inadmissible. But what they've said is it takes time to work, and the Conservatives know this is an election issue. So it has to be seen to start working before then.
So, Candice, why are they looking at scrapping it? Because the cost does not equate with the results that they're actually finding in Australia. It is found to be one of the worst expensive policies have brought in.
Well, it's been an issue that has been controversial in Australia, but...
No, I didn't ask if it was controversial. I said it doesn't work and it's expensive.
No, but that's not true, because I was speaking to an Australian KC who was very integral to the policy in Australia, and he said it did work and the numbers did go down.
By 13.
By 13 what?
13 people.
13 people. Well, not according to them. They said it would go down.
Tony Abbott told an exclusive on this show that this made a massive difference.
It does not make a massive difference. And this one, if you look at the people smugglers that were...
What would you do, though, Gina?
You have to have legal routes. You have to have legal routes, and you have to have a border force that are trained, are paid a proper salary.
Yeah.
And look at the report. They're leaving in their droves. They don't have.
But that is my argument. And Denise, to bring you in, that is my argument. People will tell me there need to be safe routes. People will tell me the border force system, the asylum processing is not fit for purpose. Why has it taken 13 years for somebody in the Tory party to grasp the nettle and go, we need to bloody well do something about this?
I don't necessarily know how effective the actual piece of legislation is going to be, because I don't think at the moment you are even able to use the Rwanda policy, because that's even currently being reviewed. I think that's being looked at in April. I think it's going to be reviewed essentially. So there isn't, to me, in my view, a coherent policy from the Conservative Party. What you invariably have is window dressing, and in relation to...
Let me pick you up on that, because this is something that Kate said, which I think is really interesting. I mean, this is laughable. The Tony Blair Institute today says that the illegal immigration bill is a soundbite dressed up as a solution. That from Tony Blair. That's a bit bloody rich, isn't it?
Well,
isn't it?
The thing is...
What would the Labour Party do differently? Come on, tell me what the Labour Party would do differently.
I don't necessarily know if the Labour Party is going to do anything differently. Their offer is management. They have said, essentially, we will manage the problem better than the Conservative Party.
But that's not substance.
But that's the point. That's what they're offering. I would have expected Keir Starmer to say something about the inhumanity of this bill, the cruelty of the bill, but essentially what he said is...
it's illegal.
It's illegal.
Bill.
Yeah.
So why would he not, do you think, Kate?
Because he doesn't want to risk any votes. He wants to be on the podium when its time comes on the... I think
that's really interesting from a Labour campaigner saying that Starmer... And let me ask you this, Kate. This is really interesting. Are the Labour Party going to fall into a trap set by Sunak, which is having to discuss the one thing that seems to be central to so many people's minds, but the Labour Party is in a difficult position. People want toughness, but certain elements of the Labour Party are not interested. You said they walked out.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about this whole debate is actually when you look at the polling of people across the country, people don't actually want to see everybody stopped from coming into the UK. What they want is to see fairness and control. And actually, when you ask people across lots of different polling, would you be happy to see more people accepted here under safe routes? Generally, people say yes, but only if communities can support it, only if money is put into the infrastructure, like school places, like GP places, for people to actually come and live and work here. That's part of this problem. The political reality for Labour is that they don't want to be talking tough because they want to try and straddle a very careful line. So what they are offering is increasing, you know, border force cooperation with the French, something Rishi Sunak's going to be talking about on Friday. They also talk about targeting the gangs, and this is crucial. The reason we're talking about, is this legal? What's it going to mean? Is it going to be stopped in the courts? That's actually something that helps the Prime Minister to an extent, because what he wants is a message to get out to people smugglers. This is the world's toughest legislation. We are going to go further than anybody else. Don't come here. Don't waste your money on getting on a boat.
And Candice, to bring you back in, and I will disagree with you only, Gina, because we spoke to Tony Abbott, and the one thing that he said was that we set fear amongst the people from Java that were going to come over here. It was almost like a public relations exercise, and people stopped because they realised they couldn't have it. My question
But I'm sorry, in the Rwanda policy, that was supposed to do the same thing. That was going to scare people and they were not going to come.
Yeah.
It didn't make any difference.
But no flights have gone.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but at the time when they brought out the legislation, Suella Braverman stood up and said, it will stop people coming over here. And it didn't do that.
So what it actually did in some cases...
Tony Abbott said on this show, a short,
made more
sharp
people
push on the boats stopped people's expectations. Would you agree with that?
Well, yes. What they're trying to do is they're trying to break the traffickers' business model. So they're trying to say, if you come by these routes, you will not be allowed in. So people will not hand their money to these people traffickers because they know there's no chance of them getting in that way. And I don't think we can allow human traffickers to control this trade. I think it's dangerous.
They're blaming the victims. I think this is the problem. The victims are being held responsible. What we should essentially be having is a safe routes. We should have proper funding of our local authorities so that we can manage the immigration question properly. And what we have is 13 years of ineptitude, in my opinion.
But you've just sat there and said, as a Labour supporter, that...
I'm not a Labour... If I can correct you, I'm not a Labour supporter. I do advocate particular policies for both sides of the aisle.
In terms of Starmer, though, it's interesting. I mean, it's exactly what Kate said. And the frustrating thing is, I mean, this is the third night. It's probably about the third year we've sat here doing this. I would love somebody to say, you know, this is the answer. There doesn't seem to be one answer.
Isn't one answer.
I mean, I had
I
an immigration lawyer on, Ivan Sampson, the other night, who said, you have to remember that Great Britain is about compassion and fairness. I will put to all of you what I put to everybody every single night, and some of you won't like this. How do you explain to Mr. and Mrs. Joe Bloggs, somewhere, wherever, in the United Kingdom tonight, who are struggling their backsides off, who cannot feed their kids and heat their homes, who will say, whether you like it or not, they're staying in hotels. The government doesn't have money to make it easier. Why aren't we being looked after? That, Gina, is what people are saying on the doorsteps. Fact.
I know what people are doing on the doorsteps.
That's what they're saying.
No. I'm going round on the doorsteps. I don't know if you're going down on the doorsteps, but I am. With True and Fair Party, we're on the doorstep all the time. And I absolutely disagree that people talk about immigration. What they're talking about is a cost of living crisis.
So where do you get the money to deal with this?
And it is disgraceful that we've got people in hotels for this long time. For 7. Absolute disgrace. It's even a bigger disgrace that we've got children, hundreds of children, who have disappeared from those hotels. It's the government's fault. It's this Tory government. I'd say to Mr. and Mrs. Biggins or Jones, whoever it is. Biggins, Jones, whoever.
Biggins? How did Biggins get on?
It's the government. This government are totally incompetent. They've cut everything to the bone for 13 years. They have no answers. They are out of ideas.
Listen, so much to talk about. Kate McCann, thank you very much indeed.